I know. You didn't want to.
120 seconds early.
Didn't want to buy an appetizer.
I had to go back to the house after my soccer practice. It was rescheduled.
Well, Todd was here. He changed in the bathroom.
How about this logo?
Changed in the bathroom.
Pretty sweet logo.
I know. I like that logo.
Yeah, I like that one. I wonder who came up with that.
I don't know.
Some awesome people were involved, I'm sure.
Close enough. You sum that up. 1900?
I got 1900.
You got 1900? Okay. All right. It's 7 p.m., 1900 hours in Gardner, Kansas. I'm going to call the Gardner City Council meeting to order. Please rise with me and recite the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, we do not have, actually we do have a presentation. So I'm going to read this proclamation. I see Steve Hale, who's working the Active Count Committee for Census 2020 is here. Thank you for coming and being a part of our meeting tonight. So the proclamation reads as thus. Whereas the U.S. Census Bureau is required by the U.S. Constitution to conduct a count of the population and provide a historic opportunity to help shape the foundation of our society and play an active role in American democracy, and whereas the census is vital to our community and that the data ensures fair congressional representation by determining how many seats each state will have in the U.S. House of Representatives, as well as the redistricting of state legislature, county, and city councils and voting districts. And whereas an accurate census count is vital to our community and residents' well-being by helping planners determine where to locate schools, daycare centers, roads and public transportation, hospitals and other facilities, and whereas billions of dollars in state and federal funding for social and other programs are allocated in part on census data, and whereas census information is confidential and federal law prohibits any public or private agency from gaining access to this data, now therefore, be resolved that I, Steve Shue, Mayor of the City of Gardner, Kansas, do hereby recognize Gardner, Kansas to be a Census 2020 partner and is committed to ensuring every resident is counted. It's our privilege to partner with the U.S. Census Bureau in achieving an accurate and complete count in Census 2020. And I believe, will I give this to Steve, or do we read this here on site? We have a copy, so Steve, come on up. I'll give you a copy of this proclamation. This kind of symbolizes our partnership with the Accurate Census Count Committee. And if you want to say a couple of words about the census, we have the.
Well, you said it all right there very well. And I would say that I was at the Gardner Senior Center the other day, and I noticed there were flyers in there for to promote for a complete and accurate count from the census, and they came from the Johnson County Complete Count Committee, which Jim and Danica are very much a part of, and we appreciate it. And just remind everybody that the census is safe, easy, and important. So there we go.
Thank you very much, Steve. Appreciate your
All right.
time and investment.
Thanks. Appreciate it.
You go, Lee.
Okay. There are no public hearings tonight, so we'll go straight to public comments. Members of the public are welcome to use this time to make comments about city matters or items on the agenda that are not part of a public hearing. As I said, we don't have a public hearing tonight, so any item on the agenda or off the agenda is free for discussion. So we only have 3 ground rules. One is that we have a 5-minute time limit on comments per individual. Secondly, no profanity, and thirdly, no personal attacks of any individuals from the podium. With that being said, please come forward, state your name and address for the record if you wish to provide public comment.
Good evening. My name is Susan Smith. I live at 18370 South Canton Street. In the last several weeks, there has been a lot of information on one of the Gardner Facebook pages about pushing for a non-discriminatory non-discriminatory ordinance for people who identify as LGBTQ. I had heard testimony on August 26th here at the council meeting, and even this afternoon there's been a lot of inflammatory things added to that on the Facebook page. I wanted to come and share with you that I trust you to make a good decision, but I'm worried about the level of emotion and what you're hearing. So basically, gay rights are still in question as far as whether they are a civil right by our nation's Supreme Court. They are working on that currently. There's currently non-discrimination laws, both federal and state, covering what is defined as civil rights. Kansas and our nation defines civil rights as gender, race, religion, disability, color, national origin or ancestry, or in housing by reason of familial status. LGBTQ individuals often feel like they are being pursued with hate crimes. The nation has a law for that. It is the Matthew Shepard and James B. Byrd Jr. Hate Crime Prevention. I have 7 questions that I would like to pose before a decision would be made on such an ordinance. First thing is, if a code were passed, who would be in charge to enforce it? Secondly, what charges or penalties would be defined by this code? How would sexual orientation be determined? Researchers from all sciences cannot, as of yet, determine an objective answer to identify sexual orientation. All other civil rights have objective factors. Fourth, how will discrimination be determined? Fifth, who will pay the legal costs? Sixth, how can any judgment be appealed if there's no higher court that recognizes it? 7, if this ordinance is singled out for those with diverse sexual orientation, what would we be faced with others that have situations where they felt discriminated against, such as appearance or difficult social skills? I believe you have plenty to do, that this would be a very complex ordinance to even consider. I feel that it is being really pressed now to try to get us to do that soon before there are national and state agendas in place. And I would rather that this be tabled until the nation and Kansas takes a step on this, in which our community can simply fall into line and we are not spending our money trying to deal with something this vague. Thank you very much. Thank you for all of your responses today when I emailed you. I appreciate your concern.
Thank you, Susan. Thank you. Any other public comments?
Good evening. I'm Tim Hecker, 22460 South Moonlight Road. I understand that tonight you're going to be talking about the expansion of the water plant over there in my area. So I live just right north of the water plant. And over the past, let's say 3 or 4 years, the city of Gardner and Miami County has been working to try to get this road paved. So the city of Gardner, for the people that may or may not have been on the board at the time, decided in conjunction with Miami County to chip and seal it. The base was put down and then it was put off to the side. But the agreement, my understanding is from Mr. J.R. McMahon, that you guys have the obligation to keep the road with protection on top of it to keep the dust under control. Is this correct? I would think that it is, because Mr. McMahon said that it was, that dust control would be delivered and put upon every year, a couple times, to keep the dust at bay. Unfortunately, my understanding is now this project, which was going to be chip and sealed this year, has been put on the back burner. For what reason? They said that the plant needs to have the expansion. I don't know if anybody is aware that I had a fatality in front of my house 2 years ago. And this fatality happened because the road, in my opinion, hadn't been paved. If it would have been, he might have been able to stop, but it was a gentleman that lived just to the south of the water treatment plant. So my question to you tonight is two parts. Number one, I'd like to know what you're thinking about annexing over there in the neighborhood. And number two is, when are we going to get something done, at least at the minimum of what you guys said that you were going to do, which was put dust control down, or get it chipped and sealed, or asphalt. I don't care, but you have an obligation between you and Miami County to take care of the road. And in my opinion, you have not done it. Thank you.
Thank you, Tim. Any other comment? Seeing none, we'll move on to the consent agenda. Is there any member of the council who wishes to remove an item from the consent agenda? Seeing none, I'd like to entertain a motion on the consent agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Motion, Melton, second, Moore, that we approve the consent agenda. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, any abstentions? Consent agenda passes. There's nothing on the planning and zoning consent agenda, committee recommendations, or old business, so we're moving straight to new business. New business item number 1, consider approving an amendment to the purchasing policy. Finance Director Matt Wolf. Good evening.
Good evening, Mayor, Council. The purchasing policy hasn't been updated since 2015. Since that time, departments have shared several comments with the Finance Department on basically recommendations on how we can improve the purchasing policy. These recommendations are based on adding clarity and also operational efficiency to the policy. So I met with each director just to see what their concerns were. After meeting with them, I have several recommendations I'd like you to consider. The first one is adding a section to address the process for obtaining professional services between $25,000 and $50,000. The current policy describes $10,000 and below contracts, $10,000 to $25,000, where department directors have to provide justification and seek approval from the city administrator. Then it jumps to $50,000, where it's basically an RFP or RFQ process. So people are wondering, what do we do for $25,000 to $50,000? And my recommendation is department directors would basically provide a recommendation to the city council. They get approval from the city council, but the directors would be responsible for making sure that's a qualified candidate or vendor. The next change would be adding a section to allow the city administrator to submit a critical inventory plan to the city council. Essentially, we have critical inventory that we must keep, and it exceeds a city administrator's authority. So the idea is we have basically an inventory level plan, have council review it and approve it, and then as we consume that inventory, we're allowed to replenish it up to a certain level. And then the third change is adding some language to the multi-year contract sections, which specify that we're referring to over 12 continuous months. Some people thought it might include like a 2-month contract that went from December 2019 to January 2020. I believe the intention of multi-year is basically 12 months and over. It is staff's recommendation that you approve these changes to the purchasing policy.
Thank you, Matt. Any public comments on new business item number 1? Questions for Matt Wolf from council?
So right now, Matt, we don't have anything between 25 and 50,000.
There's no guidance in the purchasing policy. Generally, it hasn't been too much of a problem because anything over 25 has to go to council anyways.
Right.
But we just want to kind of spell that out for people.
I think the issue is really more around bids and whether or
Yeah.
not we needed to solicit specific bids through an RFP process.
I think that would be the best thing because it just keeps everything above board, me personally. You know, right
Yeah.
now, I trust staff wholeheartedly, but that could, you just never know what happens. And we don't want to get into a situation where that's ever called into question.
Would there be any kind of circumstance where that might be a hindrance?
What immediately comes to mind is utility and critical inventory, which we probably can address through the critical inventory list that, if that's approved, that I submit to council.
Okay, so you're all right with just going to an RFP process above 25,000?
Well,
Is that gonna be a
the
problem?
problem is doing a full RFP for 25 to 50,000, you might not get any interest from people.
We have a lot of times that we don't get but one bid for
One bid.
things over
Right.
50,000. So you're gonna take, what, 6 weeks to do the bid process, which then staff reviews anyway
Right.
before it comes here.
Yeah, I agree with Rich, and the next question I'd have is, like, of all the purchases, how much of the 25 to 50K fall into that? I mean, is it 10% of total purchases? Is it?
I'd have to do research on that, I can't answer that.
But what I'm trying to lead to is how much would this affect us, to Mark's point, if it goes to RFP, which I do support, but we don't want to make it more laborious than it needs to be. If we need for Gons, a spool of copper wire that's 20K, 27K, a 6-week process to get that when he needs it yesterday.
Well, I think we're kind of mixing some things, like, when we're talking about critical inventory, that's kind of a separate issue than professional services.
Correct.
Professional services is what I was talking about for the 25 to 50,000. And the concern is we won't be able to generate any interest by doing that full, like, long process for an RFP for 25 to 50,000. And I don't think it's very common, and the ones that we do are sometimes kind of like add-ons, or I think recently we had something where Burns and Mac is gonna help us with acquire easements for the water treatment plant.
Yep.
That type of situation.
Let me give you an example of this. So we've got a situation with some folks who are doing some development. They want to do a study. They want to do an environmental study or a traffic study. And those typically, a lot of those studies end up between $25,000 and $50,000. You may only find 1 or 2 specialized companies that even would be interested, let alone to have your 3 bidders for an RFP. But it's timely. You got to do something that's time sensitive. We've got to get this done, to be able to satisfy contractual requirements or financing agreements or whatever. Now you're going to put that to RFP, and that's one of the situations off the top of my head. Like most of our studies end up in that.
So professionally, we work with preferred vendors for small one-off projects like that. Do we not
Correct.
have a preferred vendor list that would negate the RFP process?
That would make
Then you have
sense.
to have
Not really.
Yeah, absolutely.
what a preferred vendor is. I mean, there's times where we're dealing with a vendor, 2 years ago, and we want to do something now that they have the expertise and the background to deal with, and they may be a preferred vendor, but we're not creating that list as we go. So we'd have to have some criteria for what actually a preferred vendor would be.
Yeah. And a lot of these studies are a one-off, yeah.
Yeah, in my opinion, I mean, as long as it still goes in front of the council, I mean, you still have the opportunity to review it. And
Well,
that
then
point,
it's been 6 or 8 weeks, that'd be my thing, I guess. 'cause
Well,
it's-
that's with an RFP,
yes.
yes. We can also ask for.
Todd, you're saying bring it forth to the council sooner if the RFP is not utilized?
Well, he's saying if there is no RFP.
Right.
yeah, I'm not saying necessarily sooner, I'm just saying, I mean, you still have the opportunity to review it, and
And ask
if you
for it.
feel like this should be bid out, then I guess that's still the option.
Then maybe you could start your preferred vendor list in the future, have it come before council. What do you think, Rich?
And
will.
if the council's not satisfied with the justification for not doing an RFP, we send it back and we'll do one.
Yeah,
I would rather go that way, because that way we can let the staff do their job. And if we don't feel like the staff has done enough due diligence, then in those cases, we can absolutely ask for an RFP at that point.
Let's change the verbiage and.
I'm fine with that.
I think that works.
Does that require a change to the policy?
I guess what added verbiage would you want? Because right now it stands for, it's not required to do RFP. We basically, the department director would have to come before council, make the recommendation, give the justification, and at that point, you can always kick it back to staff if you think there should be a lot of people. If you think there's people interested in it, then
It wouldn't
kick it back.
require that we change the language, because we always reserve the right to ask for an RFP.
Fair enough.
But satisfactory.
Yeah.
Good with that.
Any other comments? Okay, anything else on the list of items to discuss? One of the things I wanted to ask about was how we would put together that critical inventory request.
Essentially, city administrator would meet with department directors and create the list, and we'd have to give some justification for the items on there.
We then have to approve the list.
Oh, you do have to approve the list, yes.
Are we still
And that'd be
using?
an annual basis, so as we go forward, as we grow as a city, we might need like maybe 3 of a certain transformer instead of 2 or something like that. But we'd have to bring that to council to approve that new level.
Correct.
Are we still using the preventative maintenance software? So that should help with projections on what those critical items are.
We're using the Lucity maintenance management system, and there's a module associated with inventory. So right now we keep track of every purchase, everything that is issued from stores or the warehouse. So we have pretty good, a lot of data that we can provide to justify the change to the policy.
Yeah, and you can see those projections, 6-9 months in advance based on history, so that's a good deal.
Yeah, I don't really see this much of a change. Instead of coming to us 12 times, you'd have a list that you could give to us once a year.
I don't mind
So,
that.
I mean, we're already gonna have, you know that you have to buy salt for the roads, you know you have to buy chemicals for the plant, et cetera, et cetera.
Okay. I'll entertain a motion into business item number 1.
So moved.
Second.
Motion Melton, second Gregorsek, that we approve the amended purchasing policy. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Any abstentions? New business item number 1 passes. New business item number 2, consider authorizing the execution of a contract with Cohorst Enterprises to construct a crosswalk at 183rd Street and Mulberry. Michael Kramer. Talking about crosswalks tonight.
Evening, Mayor and Council. Last week on August 9th, on August 9th, we advertised for bids, and last week we received the bids included in the packet. Cohorst Enterprises for $60,244. Land Telecommunications at $78,604. And Mega Industries at $80,866. We're recommending that Cohorst be awarded the project. And essentially, this is the crosswalk improvements at Mulberry and 183rd. It includes the crosswalk and the signage and the RRFB lighting. And the engineer's estimate, by the way, was just right in with about $1,000 of their bid at $59,000. So.
Do we have a time frame on that?
I do not. Part of it will depend on how long it takes to get the equipment in. The equipment is generally, even though it's pretty common, it's built to order at times, and so I'm not sure on the timing.
Sorry, I interrupted.
That's all right. That's all right.
I'm just excited.
Get that. Anything else, Michael?
One thing we did look. We talked with Mike Gardner's worked with them in the past on projects. They've done some different drainage projects in the city, and in 2011 they worked on the Horizon Trails project for the development.
Great. Any public comments on new business item number 2? Seeing none. Questions from council? Rich.
I'd like to know the timeline on this.
What?
The timeline.
Yeah,
I'm just kidding.
yeah, okay.
So we're talking about next couple. Yes.
I did have a question. Is this? Yeah. I was looking through here, looking for the sign with the flashing LEDs, and is that in here? Yes, that is part of the permanent signage, and on the very last page of your packet on this agenda item is the one plan sheet, and so you can see there's a A and a B, and so the A calls out the RRFB lighting on that. Yeah, I see that on the installation.
Any other questions?
I just have a trivial question, Mike, and maybe I just need new glasses. How far is the B light from the intersection on the, what would that be, the eastbound side?
I'm not sure on
Okay.
that. Yeah.
Well, the reason why I'm asking, and
A2.
Rich probably can answer the question, but isn't that downhill coming
It
eastbound?
crests a hill there.
Okay,
on the-
so it's
on
gonna
the
be
side.
on the crest, I would assume, or
Yeah,
on
so
the high side?
the B, there's not actually a light at the B. And there is in the MUTCD, there's a standard distance
Okay.
that's supposed to be ahead of. But you're right, there is a little hill that you would pop
Okay.
up over there.
Yeah, just so that people see it before they accelerate down the hill, whether it be gravity or gas pedal.
Okay.
That's it.
Should be 35 miles an hour in that street. But
Well,
I
his
don't think
video, and
anybody-
we live over
Oh, I
there,
know.
well, hell, all
I know, we
four
all
of
do.
us, three of us
Yep.
live over there.
Yeah,
It's
I know.
a speedy place.
Mhm.
Plus, you've got 18-wheelers going through there. Before Robert Cook passed away, he had them turning around in his, where his hen houses were.
Yep.
It's ridiculous.
Yep.
I know Jim, when he was the chief, he put up new signs and stuff for us, so.
Yep. Okay, noted. Any other questions? Motion on new business item number 2.
Second.
Motion Melton, second Moore, that we authorize the city administrator to execute a contract with Cohorst Enterprises to construct a crosswalk at 183rd and Mulberry in an amount not to exceed $60,244. And one last question, really quickly. This is not budgeted, but we're picking this up with special
Correct.
sales tax fund.
So it is coming from special sales tax fund.
Okay, just to make it clear to everybody out
Yes.
there. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Any abstentions? New business item number 2 passes. New business item number 3, consider authorizing a service contract with Cohorst Enterprises for the dewatering and clean out of the Hillsdale Water Treatment Plant ponds. Hans Garcia.
Sounds exciting.
Oh, it sounds very watery.
Good evening, Mayor, City Council. As you may know, the Hillsdale Water Treatment Facility have two retention ponds, retention basins, we call it ponds. And the purpose is to send all the sludge generated from the clarifiers and the media filters. We typically clean each pond one pond every year. So in 2016, we entered into a contract with Walters Excavating LLC for cleaning the ponds in 2016 through 2019. When we reached Walters Excavating this year, they sent us a note saying that they couldn't do the clean out because they had other commitments in Lee Summit. Due to this late notice, put us in the city to find other contractors that can do the work. So we went ahead and requested quotes. We got 3, one from Denali Water Solution for $151,700, Cohorts Enterprises $123,900, and Nutraject Systems $141,353. The city have done work with cohorts, as Michael Kramer mentioned, but in the line maintenance, they do most of the emergency sanitary break repairs. They're very responsive and they do a very good job. So we're recommending going with Cohorts Enterprises for the pond cleanout. Now, this is very critical because the new expansion for Hillsdale is going on the east pond. So right now we need to clean the west pond, take all the sludge out, then dewater the east to the west, and then clean the east pond. And there's some pictures there so you can see the magnitude of the clean out.
Okay, thank you very much, Collins. Any public comment on new business item number 3? If you wish to comment, you can step to the microphone.
Question, is this the appropriate time for that?
If it's regarding this particular agenda item, you can come up to the podium and address your question, absolutely.
It's not an objection.
Please state your
Hi.
name and address for the record.
Hi, I'm Nicole Beaton. I live at 18401 Ash Street. So I have a point of curiosity. This is the second time Cohorst Enterprises has come up with which seems to be the bid that the city would want to go with. And I have a question about whether there's a policy that exists on either side of a coin. So do we have a policy where, perhaps with favored vendors, that there's a percentage of the city of Gardner's contracts that we wouldn't go over that percentage of our contracts to a specific vendor across our budget lines? And then do we require that the vendors that we're working with not rely on the city of Gardner for more than X percent of their annual revenue?
That's a good
Is that any kind of a,
question.
I've been doing
We
my
understand
homework and
that.
I haven't seen anything, and this was just the second time I heard that name come up, and so I was just curious.
Very well, thank you. Thank
We
you for
have
the question.
no policies regarding that, and I'm not really familiar with many cities that do.
I think it's talking about non-exclusivity, I think, of the use of certain vendors.
Right.
We essentially look for who provides, a low-cost bid that we think is a qualified vendor that can actually carry out the work and stands in good standing with the city.
Yeah. I think this is the first 2 times I've heard Coerce Enterprises mentioned.
Okay.
In the time I've been here.
Yeah, same here.
So, yeah, I think it might be more of a
It stuck-
coincidence than anything else.
It stuck out to me too, though.
Yes, it did. Same.
Okay, thank you.
But thank you. Thank you very much for your comment. Any questions from those guys?
Ryan, where are we at with contract with Walters?
So the contract with Walters, and Michael might be able to expand on this a little bit. When we entered into the contract with them in 2016, I didn't actually recall the circumstances surrounding the pond cleanup, but I think the way that it was framed to me, we were in kind of a pinch to get that done. Walters stepped in. We did enter into a contract with them for a set contract amount, but then year over year thereafter, it was renewable upon mutual consent. Well, basically what Walters said this year is they weren't providing consent. Our issue with them, and I did send them a notice, is what we considered, although the consent piece doesn't have a time frame attached to it, it was sent late enough where we're finding ourselves in the position that we are in, where we're kind of having to scramble to find a contractor. And so we did, our notice letter to them advised them of that situation and told them we may choose to seek any remedies that we may have available to us. So that's where we stand with them. They're on notice, and Gonz is taking the next step of, well, we've got to get somebody to do the work in the time frame we've got.
Okay, thank you.
That was gonna be one of my questions. Next question was, are we moving into a contract with Cohorse similar to, the other vendor, Walters?
No, sir, this is just
A
a
one-off?
once on a time because of the urgency of getting the East Pond clean for the expansion. However, since the original contract with Walters was for 4 years, we're right now at the point that we need to go ahead and do a invitation for bids for the next 4 years. So that will start late this year.
After this project's done?
Yep, for
Even
2020.
if the parties renewed, this was gonna be the last year that the parties could renew by mutual consent. So we were ready for a re-up on it anyway.
Yeah, we're in breach right now, in material breach of the contract according to what you believe is the interpretation of the agreement. Understand we don't have a formal notice requirement, but the fact that it came so late basically puts them in breach. And so we're looking at a potential recovery of these additional costs that we're having to pay for the.
I can evaluate for you in executive session what our chances for success of true interest on that.
Sure.
But our main thing in sending the demand letter to Walters was just come do the work.
Yep.
And basically, I think Michael had a conversation with them about that, and they all but refused to do that.
Okay.
And so, yeah, my conversation with them was, well, we can do that, but it'll be much later than you need it done.
Yeah, there was a timing element because of the conversation,
Sure.
Yeah, we need to have the ponds clean before October 15th.
Yep.
So right now with Cohurst, they'll get it clean before October 1st.
Okay. But we're paying a lot extra for it. $70,000.
We're paying a little bit more, like $20,000 more than Walters.
Although, last year we renewed, Michael, by mutual consent, and it was more than the 16 base bid, correct?
Yeah, and I don't recall the numbers, and Gons would have those, but one of the things about the contract this year is it is for both ponds, and previous years were only one.
Yeah.
So it's not as big as the 60 or so to 123. It's a smaller number.
That's good clarification because we only do one pond since we have to have that second pond done.
Yep.
Accelerates things. All right, any other questions? Yes?
I just have
Lee.
one, and this is just curiosity. What, I was reading here, it says mainly clarifiers and media filters. What, as to the consistency of this sludge, what exactly does that mean? What's in the sludge?
So the clarifier takes any solids. So those solids the clarifier are backwash. So those solids are sent to the ponds.
So it's basically stuff that we're pulling out of Hillsdale Lake. And
It can be a lot of, if you look at the picture, it look like dirt.
Yeah.
But they're sediments. So the same thing happened with the filters. They accumulate sediments, so that has to be backwash.
Okay.
So
they're
that wash goes to the ponds.
So they're just taking a bulldozer and a backhoe or whatever this thing and hauling this stuff somewhere where
Now,
they need dirt.
correct, that's on the west, it's fairly dry, but on the east, it's kind of wet, so they have to dewater to the west and then get a front loader or an excavator and put it in a dump truck and take it to a land.
That's all.
Just moving mud.
Moving mud.
Yeah, pretty much.
Good times.
All right, any other questions? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion on business item number 3.
So moved.
Second. Motion, Melton, second, Winters, that we authorize the city administrator to execute a service contract with Cohorse Enterprises Incorporated for the Hillsdale Water Treatment Plant ponds cleanout in an amount not to exceed $123,900. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? New business item number 3 passes. New business item number 4, consider annexation of the Hillsdale Water Treatment Plant into the city. Gons.
Yes, presently the Hillsdale Water Treatment Plant is in Miami County, belongs to the city, but is not annexed to the city. So we saw a opportunity to annex the water treatment plants to the city, such that we can facilitate and expedite any necessary permitting, and so that the city can have regulatory control over the construction activities on the site. We did a calculation, and the Miami County permits can run all the way up to $150,000. So by doing the annexation, we can save on the building or construction fees.
All right, any public comments on new business item number 4? Please come forward.
I would like to know the boundaries that you're looking at annexing, because
Come to the
Yes,
microphone.
please come to the mic if you could, and state your name and address.
for some reason I thought I could speak loud enough, but.
Oh, no, it's
for the
just-
people
it's
at home.
formality. Yeah,
So, Moonlight runs north to south, and that's on the east side of Moonlight, the water treatment plant. What are you proposing to annex in that vicinity? Are you gonna stay on the east side of the road? Are you gonna come up to the west? How many miles are you looking at north and south from 223rd to the south? What is the proposal?
Well, basically, where we annexing is the actual property that we own, which is east of the Moonlight Road.
On the east side?
Yep.
That's all you're looking at annexing?
Yes, sir.
Now, which brings to the question, when is the proposal gonna be done for this expansion, and when is the road plan on being?
Can I answer here or can I?
And actually, we're gonna be addressing that in council updates in a couple of minutes, so.
Okay.
Yeah, this is not germane to this particular issue, but we will discuss that. So, yes, Collins, any
No,
questions for
so
Collins?
the staff recommendation, to go ahead and do the annexation.
Okay,
of
great.
Hillsdale.
Questions?
So we're working on the easement for the pipeline down there,
Yes,
and then this would be an island annexation of the actual plant.
the actual plant,
Okay.
the actual property.
And per state law, I would have to go to the Miami County Board of County Commissioners to approve.
I don't think that's right.
Okay.
I did research it, so when it's city-owned property,
Okay,
I think the initial communication with Miami County was that anytime there's an island annexation, it has to go before the Board of County Commissioners, which is true, except on city-owned land.
all right, thank you for that clarification.
Right, so on city-owned land, all you have to do is, it's kind of weird, we are approving a consent, which is a petition to ourselves to annex.
Yeah, pretty much.
And then at your next council meeting, then you'll approve an ordinance, and per KSA 12-520A2, an ordinance is all you need, you don't need county commission approval.
Oh, okay, great, thank you.
The city's grown by leaps and bounds.
So we just have to ask ourselves and then,
And then we say yes.
and then say yes to ourselves.
So that we
I
can
hope we
maintain
don't
what we
deny
already
ourselves.
maintain.
Right.
It's a bit schizophrenic. Okay, so thank you very much, Ryan, for that clarification. So we do not need county commission approval for this island annexation.
I still might vote no, I don't know.
Well, all right, any other questions? All right, I'll entertain a new business.
So moved.
Motion.
Second?
Motion Gregorczyk, second Moore, that we authorize the mayor to execute consent to annex the city's Hillsdale water treatment plant into the city of Gardner, and that such consent should be filed with the city clerk. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
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 All opposed? Any abstention? New business item number 4 passes. New business item number 5, this is an exciting one. Consider annexation agreement with landowner consent. Jim Pruding, good evening.
Good evening. This is a request to annex 261 acres of property owned by Day 3 LLC that was received by the city on August 21st, 2019. If you're not familiar, if you go down 175th, go across the bridge and look right, it's over there, the Grotto property. Everybody familiar with that? The attached voluntary consent annexation agreement outlines the terms agreed on by the city and the property owners as conditions for this consent annexation. This agreement is a precursor to a development agreement that the city and Day 3 are currently working to finalize. And just a kind of a side note, we wouldn't have gotten to this point if both sides weren't confident that we could finalize that agreement. So we kind of skipped a step from doing a memorandum of understanding, and because of the progress that was made and what it took to get there, we decided just to go straight to a development agreement and get it done. So.
Okay. Any public comment on new business item number 5? Seeing none, questions for City Administrator Pruding?
I don't have a question. I just want to make a statement that I do want to thank you for the hard work you've put in on this, even before your time as city administrator. It's been going on a long time to build that relationship with Grotto. So thank you. Thank you.
Question for me is timetable. Do we have a possible timetable on the development agreement at this point?
It most likely will not be ready by the next council meeting, but by the first council meeting in October is when we anticipate having it for review.
Per the terms of the annexation, there's a cost to de-annex if the
October 21st.
Yeah, October 21st, if
Right.
the development agreement has not been finalized and approved by October 21st.
That's correct.
So, okay, that gives us 2 meetings in October to complete that process.
Yeah, and that's their option, but we made that date in such close proximity because of the confidence we have in getting it done, so.
Okay, great. Will you let us know if things slip?
Yes.
Yeah, I echo Rich's positive praise, and I just remind us what happened to de-annexation the last time the elected body was against a project, not similar to this, but a project. So let's make sure we hit the mark which I'm sure you are. You've got good momentum with you and staff and the relationship, so let's keep the train moving.
We got good momentum.
Is this a good show of faith to them versus doing the consent for annexation in October, right before we do?
Yes,
the
this kind of
development?
gives us a head start on some things that we need to get done to meet some of the timelines that will be in the development agreement with utilities and other things. So this has given us a head start on that.
Any other questions? All right. This is a ordinance, so we will have the whole council vote as a roll call vote. I did not get a vote because this has nothing to do with land use. I do.
So moved.
Yes, I was going to get there. I was clarifying things.
Second.
Thank you. No, that's out of order, man. I have to ask for a motion on new business item number 5.
So moved.
Second. Motion Melton, second Winters, that we accept the voluntary consent annexation agreement and consent annexation request of Day 3 LLC and adopt ordinance 2622, an ordinance annexing land into the city of Gardner, Kansas. City Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Councilman Moore?
Yes.
Councilman Winters?
Yes.
Councilman Baldwin?
Yes.
Councilmember Gorsuch?
Yes.
Councilman Melton?
Yes.
Ordinance 2622 passes. It's time for council updates.
Already.
Yes, we're moving right along. Does the staff have anything for council? I will start with Michael Kramer this evening.
Just a couple items. Tomorrow, the Kill Creek Trail bids. And then Friday, we have the sanitary sewer for the airport bidding. And I hadn't received any questions on the Friday minute memo regarding the pavement management. And, those cost comparisons, so we gave, fog seal per 100 feet and chip seal and et cetera. And I just wondered if you had any questions regarding that memo at all, or hopefully it was crystal
Pretty
clear.
self-explanatory. So I'm just waiting until somebody brings it up.
I think it was a great graphic. I just want to see us getting some curb replaced.
So I take it that fog is off the table for anything except the main thoroughfares.
I've never prescribed a frog, but
Fog seal, So, have we got linear foot estimates on curb replacement for?
Yeah, it's in there, and it's about $4,000 for 100 feet. It's about $40 a foot.
But that's what the community passed the tax for, is curbing.
That's true.
They passed forever.
Absolutely, it's part of it.
All right, so if we're looking at a prioritization here, and if we have to push back a couple of roads to be redone.
Actually, the curbs were not part of the original calculation,
Correct.
if I remember. It was only pavement management.
Correct.
Curbs came along after we started really studying the pavement, and we determined that curbs were not in good shape. And that is why the tax funds are strained at this moment. That's why there is so much more chip and seal than mill and overlay.
Yep.
Because we've got to pay for the curb somehow. Limited funds.
Where are we at on, you talked about the budget being strained for special sales tax. Where are we standing right now on our predicted versus actual?
So I think we're pretty close to the numbers as far as what we had projected, and I can provide some updates on that in a future memo for you. And we talked a meeting or two ago, I think, about potentially doing a work session on the pavement management, and we intend to do something like that, at least with our committee, and then come to council. It will be a while before you see that, just because of the amount of work that we want to have with projecting our plan going forward. But I can get you some updates on the numbers and where we're at currently. We have covered, I forget, it's 80 or closer to 90% of all the roadways. So 140 lane miles that we have sealed about 80 to 90% of those at this time. So, so we have, kept up with the original, program and been able to add in some curbs and such. And then, if you remember back to the presentation that we gave on the program itself, there's also several parks programs that were included in that, in the trails. Moonlight Safe Routes to School project is included in there, and so we have taken care of those programs as well.
Okay.
But I would add the reason though that we've made it this far is because we've used chip seal. We wouldn't have been able.
And chip seal was part of the original program. Yes.
Yeah. We have this discussion every year, don't we?
We do.
I mean, it's
multiple times a year.
yeah, exactly. But I think
Some of us more often than others on Facebook.
Yeah, well, the cost of being able to seal the roads for 5 to 7 years is a factor of 10 cheaper than if we were to try to do it with mill and overlay, and it only gives us 3 more years.
Yeah.
So for the dollars expended, and I know that gets into people's tires and people track it in their houses, and you can't ride motorcycles on it if it hasn't been swept real well. And I mean, we understand it's a pain, but it's inconvenience that from the standpoint of fiscal responsibility, and some people like to say we're not a fiscally responsible council, I think that from this perspective, you can't debate that.
The alternative is to not seal the roads and to watch the substrate fail underneath the road, and then you have a major problem. Then you've got full depth reclamation type stuff going on where we got to go in and replace the
I
entire
fully
road.
agree.
You what?
I said yes, I agree with that statement.
Yep. Okay.
The only
Thank
other
you.
comment I'd like to add about, you asked about how we are doing with the infrastructure special sales
Yes, thank you.
taxes. We do have, a bit of a balance in there, but keep in mind we also have years of debt service coming on, so we have to make sure we're not trying to spend every dollar we have now, make sure we can cover later debt service.
Absolutely. Thanks. All right, Larry Powell, what have you got for us?
A couple of quick items. One is an update. We've started working on the letters and notifications that are going to go out to the individuals that were previously interested in the activities in Tallgrass and what's going on with that. So we're starting that process in order to obtain a better method of communication rather than just snail mail, so to speak. So that process is ongoing. We're also worked on the infographics or the two types of processes that we currently have in place to basically show how the planning commission functions and what the responsibilities of the city council are in regards to planning commission activities. And so we're finishing those up, and hopefully we'll have those onto the website in the next week or so. We've got some cleanup work to do on color schemes or so forth that weren't approved before we did them. So we have to change colors around, but we'll get those done.
Great.
Then for those of you that wonder what's going on behind QT and didn't attend, the Price Chopper project is finally kicked off, and there was a ribbon or a groundbreaking ceremony last week, and the heavy equipment that's parked on Lincoln Street behind at the back end of that lot is some of the equipment that they will be starting to bring in and doing that. So this week, actually, cleanup of the site, the piling of moving dirt around and getting things basically lined out to really start the major part of the project will be in place. And so you're going to see a lot of activity there. I would caution people to stay off the site. That some point soon the site will be fenced, and that is for the public's protection and for the employees that are working on site so that they don't have to worry about somebody being behind them. The site has been used by the public for a long time as a dog park, which was a good use for it when it was overgrown in weeds, but at this point in time, they really should stay off the site, and there will be fencing placed on it, and if they trespass, they will be cited. So this is just for public protection and the project protection also. So
please keep that in mind. One other project that will start soon is you'll start seeing equipment down by Walmart on the blank strip of ground that's between the roadway right next to Cedar Niles where you turn in to go into the Walmart site. That is the site of a project called Bellefontaine's Car Wash. It is a tunnel type car wash. It is a fully automated car wash site, and so we will see that site being cleaned up and hopefully dirt broken or groundbreaking on that site soon. We haven't set a groundbreaking for it yet, but we will be doing that fairly quickly. So there will be that activity also. So those things are ongoing. I would like to also briefly state we've had quite a few questions recently for some reason on the medical facility at the south end of town, South Gardner Road, located across from the Phillips 66 station. Yes, that is owned by Olathe Medical Health or Olathe Health Center. It is a replacement for the existing doctor's office. They will maintain ownership of the old doctor's office and have other facilities there, so that's not on the market for sale. There have been people calling about that. And there is going to be a road that will be completed that will move to the east and ultimately hook up to 188th eastbound. So there's been a lot of questions recently for some reason on that project. It is moving along nicely. All the inspections are going well. We have not had any issues, hiccups, problems, anything at all negative about that project. It's moving down the road quickly. Mid-America Bank also on South Gardner's Road is also nearing completion, and so that will also be another project that you will see a ribbon cutting on fairly soon. So it's kind of a quick update for development projects across the city.
Like a lot of ribbon cuttings and groundbreakings, that's a good sign.
And we hope more.
Yes. Jason Bruce.
No, sir.
Nothing, okay. Gons Garcia.
Yes, regarding the chip and seal dust control for the section south of 123rd Street towards the entrance of Hillsdale Water Treatment Plant. It's in 2005, 2004, the city entered into an agreement with Miami County during the first expansion of Hillsdale, and it was for the dust control of that section of that street. Last year, or early this year, we signed an agreement with Miami County to put chip and seal on that section of the road. Miami County said it wouldn't be wise to put it in 2019 because of the construction. So the construction is gonna start October 15th and should end April 2020.
Okay.
Sorry, April 2021. During that period, the agreement states that Miami County is responsible for the dust control.
Okay.
Once the construction is over, they will apply the chip seal.
So, is this a situation where they're gonna put compounds down to?
If they have not done any dust control yet, so I'll get in contact with J.R. McMahon and talk with him about the dust control.
Okay, thank you, Gons.
Can I ask a few more questions then?
I'm sure that, yeah, if you'd like to come forward and address the staff, you can do so. I'll allow it.
Now, Mr. Garcia, I've been in contact with JR, and this is what I was told. Now, whether or not it's true, can't say for sure. But the chip and seal was supposed to happen this year, and it was supposed to happen a couple years ago. And then he said that it was going to happen this year. And so the base had been placed 3 or 4 years ago for this project. And then he said, well, due to what's coming up with the expansion project, the city council and Miami County decided not to spend the money on the dust control, which my understanding from Mr. McMahon was that the city of Gardner is in charge of putting the dust control down. So I don't know which is fact and which is fiction between the two levels that Miami County and the city of Gardner have been talking back and forth. All I'm asking is that something needs to be done. Get some control out there to keep the dust level down. We have a lot of trucks over there. And in the past, I've had to take my own personal equipment out there on the road to fix it. The potholes and stuff over there. McMahon's been fairly good about getting over there and doing that. But things have really, in the past 6 to 8 months, come to an abrupt end out there. All I'm asking is a little help from you guys here at the council. Talk to Miami County to expedite things and get it back to where at least it's halfway normal.
And Mr. Hacker, I appreciate your concern on this. We are having issues with roads all over the city with regard to breakdowns because of the spring and summer that we've had. Been very rainy, we had a bad winter with a lot of temperature fluctuations. The roads are breaking down all over the place. So totally understand, and we will work with Miami County and try to get that resolved sooner rather than later.
Appreciate it.
All right, thank you. Okay, anything else, Gons?
So,
Okay, great. Chief Belcher.
Two things real quick. Tomorrow night we'll be hosting our annual canine water training at the Aquatic Center. So don't get concerned if you see a bunch of police cars over there with a lot of police dogs running around. It's our annual training. So we thank Jason and his staff for allowing us to do that. It's really neat. We have 15 to 20 canines from all over the entire metro area that come in, and this is their yearly chance to get into the water and do training. It's really neat to see. So we'll have that tomorrow night. And then Thursday, we start our first Citizens Police Academy at the Justice Center. So we're excited about that. We've got a pretty good sized class. So that's starting Thursday. So
Great. That's it. Thanks, Chief. Appreciate it. City Clerk. Okay, Matt Wolf.
Last month, the Finance Department started the RFP process for audit services. We'll be receiving those proposals this month and reviewing them. And then we'll take a recommendation to council probably in first meeting in October.
So this is to replace the current contract with AGH, right?
Yes, possibly.
Potentially.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
It's for our annual audit.
Sure. City Attorney.
Nothing for me.
Okay. City Administrator Prudig.
I don't have anything tonight.
Okay, great. I will start with Todd Winters
Look at that.
this evening
He's hiding out
for
over there.
council updates for staff.
I don't have anything.
You don't have anything?
Nothing for me.
All right, Rich Melton.
That was weird. So I do have one thing. A citizen asked me to read their letter into the record since they weren't going to be here. This is from Greg and Beverly Buck. I'm going to cut down to the meat of it. They said, we believe that there are currently enough laws in place that will cover potential discrimination. Adding a city-level ordinance merely adds fuel to the fire and potentially creates a first discrimination against churches, businesses who operate under faith-based principles. By the way, it's about the Indio.
Yep.
There are no considerations for those of the LGBT community that there's no known reason to pass that ordinance. We believe it's in the city of Gardner's best interest to wait until the Supreme Court hands down their ruling on this exact topic. At that point, as our first city can clearly choose the best option and save unnecessary hassles for already busy law enforcement agency by having to spend manpower and investigate allegations of possible discrimination, both perceived and proven. And we urge you, the rest of the council, to abstain the Supreme Court and return to decision, whatever that might be. So sincerely, Greg and Beverly Buck. So
Okay.
I know there's been a lot of more dust up about it, but I did have a question real quick. Do we have an ordinance against murder in the city? Ryan, do you know? I didn't think so. I know that, anyway, Josh Morrow had brought this up that we, there's no ordinance against murder. And I thought, well, that's a great point because there are certain things that the city doesn't do. We don't have ordinances for that kind of stuff. We let the state and the federal government take care of that. And I think this perfectly falls into that same scenario. So I think
you'll find a lot of agreement on that. It's something that I'm gonna discuss. And
okay.
I think it's high time that we go ahead and pull out our legislative agenda and start working on getting that language put in there. So saying, hey, it's a state and federal issue. We at the city shouldn't get involved. It's going to take up resources. We don't have adequately trained people. We don't have the expertise. And to be honest with you, the patchwork of laws that's being passed is unmanageable at best and potentially
It'll be just like when the cities used to have, no concealed carry or no open carry. I mean, depending on what, each city was individualizing, you just don't know what you're getting into.
Correct. So, Councilmember Worsing?
No, I'm done, thanks.
Weigh in real quick?
No, I was waiting for Rich.
Oh, okay. I was asking if you wanted to weigh in.
Oh,
I
I see.
pulled your microphone down, but, all right. Yeah, I'll go on and let you go next.
Okay.
Yeah.
The first thing I had was, Jason, do we have any traction or what have you on the dog park out there near the fire station off of 183rd?
We did have plans to go after a grant this year, but they were not issuing any, so we talked about going after one in 2020.
Okay, thank you. With all the great growth, it occurred to me, do we have any stipulations on any new growth that has or receives tax supplements from the city of Gardner? And let me explain. So Price Chopper or Olathe Health, as an example, do we have any sort of 10, 20% spend for and with local vendors?
We have
built
a,
into to that tax.
we have a hometown preference for
Okay.
our purchasing policy. I think it's a 5% threshold.
Okay.
For local vendors.
One of the first things we did.
Yeah, it's one of the first things that, you did when because you were pushing for that. So we really do want to give that business to local. We try to give local preference to our vendor sets. You did ask another question about tax incentives, so I wanted to.
And you've already answered the question. The second from that first question was I would suggest that we raise it from 5% to maybe 10%. I think it was a good idea, but I think that we need to take a look at that and maybe raise it to raise it by 5%.
What would be the basis for that? I'm just asking.
Well, as we grow, we're going to find that we have more vendors available to us within our own city limits that could partake in that same growth. It's just something to put on the floor. I'm not looking for any great feedback. Just
Well, I'm willing to entertain it, but I mean,
My thing is we're already paying 5% more than.
well, potentially.
For a local, that's pretty good if you live here.
So I worked on a project years ago at Arrowhead, and they had the city of Kansas City, Missouri, had stipulations for minority spend, women's spend, all kinds of different spends as a portion of that project to be awarded to said contractor. And so that's kind of the angle I'm coming from, that we provide our local vendors the opportunity to get involved in the local growth that we have.
More opportunity.
Absolutely. And maybe 5% is the right number, but I'm just suggesting 5 more on top.
Well, do you, and I want to, and the question I have is, we've got to balance our fiscal, spend, and I'm talking about from the standpoint of, how can it be a rolling percentage, a sliding scale based on the size of the project? So if it's a smaller project, we might go to 10%. If it's a larger project, we go to 4%.
Yeah, we could
just
work.
trying to think, because you don't want to get in a situation where you're having these big projects bid out, and then
Can I just ask a quick question here?
Yeah.
How many times has this ever come up for you guys that we've had, even 1 or 2 people who are businesses in Gardner who are bidding against each other?
Hey, can I weigh in here real quick? I think we're talking about 2 different things. The 5% for the purchasing policy is that if we do an RFP or bids and it's a local vendor is within 5% of another vendor, we give preference to the local vendor. What Councilman Gregorcik's talking about is having as part of the development agreement requiring that whoever's doing the building or whatever use local vendors as a preference for whatever trade or craft they're doing. And he mentioned WMBE. Those are requirements like in Kansas City. You have to have 8% WMBE requirements that are part of the development agreement. So we don't have anything like that in our development agreement now where builders or developers are required to use
local vendors on the project at any percentage.
Yeah, and thank you for the clarification, because that's what I was talking about, not,
Okay, so you're not talking about 10% on the.
no, 10% of the project.
Okay, we do not have any requirements, period,
Correct.
for any projects that are done with any kind of city funds that would require those particular vendors to use city resources. We do not have that on the books right now.
Well, I think as we grow, we ought to consider that.
I would not support that.
I would not support it.
All right, so my gut right now is that anytime you tie the hands of a developer in that way, I understand we're only a city of 22,000 people, and that's probably a high estimate. We don't know yet, but it's probably right around that area. We don't have a lot of vendors in this community.
Well, here's the thing, we're just starting to get the developers to come back and talk to us.
Yeah, no, absolutely,
Exactly.
absolutely.
And we don't wanna make any more hurdles.
Yeah,
Yeah,
right, that's where I'm like going,
Yeah, no, this is more of a marathon item than a sprint, gentlemen. As we grow, I think we need to take a look at how those entities are doing business and what their spend is locally versus non-local. And locally can be defined, don't get me wrong.
If it's a long-term outlook though, then as we grow, you're gonna have more business occurring, so more vendors would hopefully be applying for the
And more
jobs.
local vendors.
And some of those may be local, some of them may
Correct.
not, but you can let the free market help push that price back down, and then the local vendor can still be within 5%.
So the price point is not my concern. My concern is that we have local vendors that are not able to get into these bids.
At any price.
At any price, correct. Whether and I'm all for the free market, gentlemen. I'm just saying, let's have some sort of home field advantage to these local venders.
Why are they not able to get in at any price?
Too
They can be within
Well, they
5%,
might
they
be
can
too
get in.
small. No, they're too
Well,
small.
yeah, but I mean.
Okay, well, then they're
we're
not qualified to do the
gonna
job.
make a developer use somebody that they're not comfortable with.
Right.
To
Well,
meet
there's
the
precedent for
criteria.
What does
this.
too small even mean?
I'll give you a great example. When we were looking at the tree trimming program for the electric, we ended up going between a couple. One of them we ended up with Ashblund again. But we literally had a lady call up here and say, my husband has a chainsaw, he will cut trees for you. Now, yeah, he could be in business and we could have hired him, but that's not the kind of quality of vendor that we want. So if they're not qualified because they're too small, then it's just not their market to be involved in.
Yeah, market wouldn't be carte blanche by any means. I just want to look at this from a long perspective and say, hey, as we grow, as we go into the 40 and 60K, let's make sure that we are asking that those contractors look at and spend a portion of those total dollars with local vendors.
We can ask, we could request it. I don't know if at this point we can even begin to think about a mandate. I mean, I think that.
I wasn't asking for
mandates
one, I
are-
was just putting it on the
Yeah.
table, putting it on the floor
I think we're way.
for something to consider.
We're way far away from that at this
Okay.
point.
I like the thought of using the local, and I just think we're not there.
Well, we have a lot of entrepreneurs that are too small, that don't feel that they have a home field advantage. And this would be one way to take a look at it, whether it's a women-owned business, a minority-owned business, et cetera. It doesn't necessarily drive or not driven by the free market. It just provides an opportunity for those portions of those spends to open up to those groups that have.
I wholly disagree with this in principle. This is not the function of why we're sitting here. This is not city government.
No, it's policy governance.
Yeah, you're trying to pick winners and losers.
Nope.
And that's not why we're sitting here.
No, sir.
That's
all I had.
Let's move forward. Okay, thank you. Mark Baldwin.
Jason, do we have any major pool expenses planned or projects for the off-season?
Dog hair removal.
Projects, no. We may have some slide repairs, but either that'll happen this fall or next spring.
And Gons, do we have any update communications from the state regarding the electric study?
They sent a letter a month ago requesting the total operating revenue for the electric utility. That information was provided to them. It was a one number.
Right.
They wanted that number to find out how much each city is gonna contribute for the study. That's all I know at this point.
Okay. All right, thank you. That's all I have.
Council President Moore.
Two things. It occurred to me last weekend, I was doing a lot of bicycle riding. And I ended up in Lawrence, where I got lost momentarily at Free State.
Yeah, that's not lost, that's found, actually.
It occurred to me, though, while I was sitting out there waiting for my wife to come pick me up, that one of the reasons that Lawrence has its vibrant downtown is because it is bicycle friendly. There are bike lanes that go right through the middle of Lawrence, and as I sat there, I watched a couple ride up on their bikes and lock their bikes up outside the business and go in and have dinner or whatever, and then they left on their bikes. Just occurred to me, though, that one of our problems with our downtown corridor, and we talk about our downtown corridor like we want it to be a vibrant place for the community to go and take part in businesses and things that are downtown. But one thing that's always hindered us has been parking. We don't have enough parking. One of the things that can help with parking is if more people were on bikes or if we were more pedestrian friendly downtown as well. So just something that, just a seed that I want to plant now, not something that we need to necessarily act on, but I've been on a number of charity rides. As you guys all know, I'm getting geared up and training for the Bike MS thing. And and I've noticed around Kansas City a lot, anywhere you find a vibrant kind of downtown, like Westport sort of feel, there's always plenty of bike parking and bike lanes all through the place. Brookside, anywhere where you find that vibe, you find lots of bikes and pedestrians. And that's just something I think we need to make sure that we have in our ingredients for a vibrant downtown corridor. So the other thing that's kind of bicycle related, there's a ride, I don't know if you guys have ever heard of it. Every year in this little town called Emporia, Kansas, they put on this thing called the Dirty Kanza. It is a gravel ride. Right now, that's kind of an up-and-coming market in bicycles. And this gravel ride started with 34 participants. It now has upwards of 3,000 participants. And those people come from all over the world. They descend on Emporia, Kansas every year, June 1st. And the participants it started with a 200-mile ride, and it's all gravel, so that's why they call it the Dirty Kanza. It's all dirt and gravel around Emporia. So the point of this is that's something that, like the air show I talked about in Oshkosh, Wisconsin, that can put a little tiny town on the map. A gravel ride or a bicycle ride's another way to get our name out there and bring in people to fill our hotels and whatnot. Every one of those riders, or many of those riders, are professionals. They show up with full-on teams, sponsored teams, and the whole town basically shuts down for the entire weekend and opens up. All of the businesses and food trucks and everything else roll in there, and it's just one big bicycle party. So I know not everybody's into bicycles, but it is one of those things that, and we have plenty of gravel around here, and lots of chip seal too. So it's one of those things that we might want to consider for the future as a potential Parks and Rec event that could.
Well, I will say that we, in my little town of Dade City, Florida, when I grew up there, population 4,500, they had they were on a Grand Prix circuit for domestic bicycle races, and they used to have a sprint relay in that little town, and they would just draw a course around the town, and they'd run bikes, and they do it through a sprint course, and it brought a lot of people, a lot of folks from way out of town to do that. So I can see that.
You're getting my thought process rolling here. We should do a fly in and ride your bike
Yeah,
at the same time.
yeah,
Because who's doing that?
yeah.
So
Yeah, food truck fly-in frenzy.
Food truck, that sounds dangerous. Food trucks fly in.
So anyway, those are two things I had. Like I said, it started with 34 people on bicycles and one 200-mile event, and now it's 6 different events over the course of a weekend, and it's 3,000 plus.
So are you thinking we should maybe have staff look into doing, like something like that?
Yeah, I think it would be a good idea.
Would that be something we'd want to test staff with or agree on as a body that they could look into that? How does that work?
Consensus?
Right.
Get a consensus to.
Because since he spent all that time explaining it, I hate for this to get lost.
So
I'm still thinking of the fly-in bike thing, and just bikes strapped on the side of planes.
If I could just add to Lee's comment, I've done that race twice. And I don't know that I was one of 34, but I believe I was in the second race. And it started as the Death Ride, and then it morphed into Dirty Kanza 200, which was started by Jim Cummings. I used to race with him. And it is a fabulous event, but I don't believe that it currently, as we speak, is a city event. It's hosted by the city, it's hosted in the city, out and back 200 miles, but it's not hosted by the city. But it is a fabulous event. Of the 200 miles, I only got 185 miles and bonked. And then the next year, I think I got in about a 190, bonked again, passed a kidney stone the size of a number 2 pencil eraser, and never did it again. But it's a fabulous event. I don't know that charging the city staff with it would be ideal, but I think we could look into it because it since has been sold by Jim Cummings to a race promoter, to your point, that has a global reach. Tinker Juarez and all kinds of ultra endurance mountain bike racers have come in and raced it. Just food for thought.
It seems like something good for our convention bureau to look into.
The CVB, we don't have one yet.
Well, but they're trying to get one going.
Oh, okay, all right.
Yeah.
Well, we can talk about it.
So it's just an idea, something that I don't know if the city would necessarily need to sponsor it.
Okay. All right, anything else? Nothing? Okay, great. Not great that you have nothing, but you know what I mean. Okay, so a couple of things. First of all, had the honor of presenting the key to the city and a proclamation to each of the young men, John Means and Bubba Starling, at last Saturday's game. We had about 100 folks from Gardner show up in section 429. Hopefully we were represented. And we saw Bubba Starling's first home run, which was a real treat. First swing of the bat, and he hit it over the fence in the left field. So I'd like to think that I was part of that because I told him it went out to left. And he said I'd try. So I'll take ownership. I'll take ownership. But we will be doing this again next year. Looks like they will be coming in April of next year, and so stay tuned. Maybe we can get Justin Weathers to sing the national anthem. We get it done this early, so we'll work on that. The other thing is I wanted to mention that I'm going to be bringing, as an agenda item to the next meeting, we'll bring a change to the legislative agenda for 2019 to incorporate some language regarding state and federal action on LGBTQ discrimination. So that'll be coming next meeting. So I want to make that clear to everybody before that happens. I don't think it's going to be a problem with passing, but I think that it's a pretty much unanimous sense of the council that any kind of action on an NDO is probably not going to be happening with this council in this city because of the complexities of interactions between the different ordinances and as well as the lack of manpower to adequately adjudicate it or anything else. Am I not correct in that, Ryan?
Yeah, I mean, I gave you my thoughts on it at
Yep.
the last meeting. I don't have anything really to expand on.
Yeah, but I'm hoping I'm adequately making that point to these folks, so, okay, great. But yeah, there'll be a change to the legislative agenda coming, so. That's about it for me. Executive session is on the agenda. I think we have about a half an hour, is that correct? About a half an hour to discuss items, and I would like an entertain a motion on executive session.
So moved.
Second.
Motion, Melton, second, Moore, that we recess an executive session pursuant to KSA 75-4319B2 to discuss matters of attorney-client privilege, beginning at 8:26 p.m., resuming regular session at 8:56 p.m. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, any abstentions? We stand in recess. Thanks, Rich.
What?
All right, right on me. I'll entertain a motion to resume
So
regular
moved.
session.
Second.
Motion Moore, second Melton, that we resume regular session. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, any abstentions? We are back in regular session. I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved. Second.
Motion Winters, second Baldwin.
What I said?
Me. They both said so moved,
Okay.
didn't they? Oh, I see, it was Baldwin. Okay, sorry. Motion
I swear, you do
Melton.
that every time.
Motion Melton, second Baldwin, that we adjourn. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, any abstentions? We are adjourned.
We're not gonna sit next to each other anymore. Unless you're just gonna give out free doctorates to me as well.